I'm really excited about today's conversation because I've been working through this topic for several years and just thrilled to see how many participants have joined us today. So we want to get started really quickly with our warm welcome and inclusion activity, of course, one of CASEL's signature practices. So in the next slide, you're going to see a quick prompt. I'm going to ask if you can sort of center in on this question for a moment and think about how you define future ready. How do you define future ready? So it seems like the future is uncertain right now. There's a lot of changes going on, both internationally and nationally. So I'm curious about how all of these changes and shifts are potentially affecting your definition of future ready. And acknowledging some great comments are going to come into the chat. I'd encourage you all to read and be inspired by the thinking of others. When we say future ready, we mean students that are ready for the future, right? With the skills they need to succeed in the future. Whether they choose to pursue post-secondary training or enter directly into the workforce or a combination of that, we want to make sure that they have the skills, not only the technical skills, but general skills needed for success in the future. And that includes communication skills, decision-making skills, and problem-solving skills, all of which you'll recognize as tightly aligned to social and emotional learning skills. So I'm really excited today to get to this conversation with our esteemed panelists who are experts in this space. And in doing so, I'm going to offer just a few framing comments during our discussion to quickly head to their discussion and the energy around that. But just to level set on this chat prompt and responses coming in, to be future ready, students do need academic knowledge, training, and credentials. Absolutely. Those have been traditionally viewed as central to success in a particular career pathway, but equally as important are the social and emotional learning skills necessary for success in work and in life, right? And these are skills like achieving goals, managing time, communicating effectively, building relationships, resolving conflicts, all things that we're hearing the employer community and communities in general say they need now. So to be clear, social emotional learning is the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes needed for success. Or simply put, it's this lifelong process of learning, right? How to understand ourselves, how to connect with others and achieve our goals and support our communities, to include the communities at work. High quality social and emotional learning approaches are designed to ensure that each and every child will be fully equipped for success in the future. So in our work at CASEL, we have been really focusing in on this need for equipping students for success through a career and workforce development community of practice. We've recently released a groundbreaking policy roadmap authored in collaboration with Civic, the Coalition for Career Development Center, and 8 state leaders, one of whom you'll hear from today. I'm so excited. And we'll offer 5 future-ready domains that require social and emotional learning competence. In the next slide, you'll see what these domains look like. Oh, we're skipping around on slides. That's all right. So I'm just going to voice them. So those 5 domains are the ability to communicate and collaborate effectively, including with supervisors, coworkers, and others. The second is knowing how to cultivate relationships with mentors and others who can support them in their career path and life, as well as family, friends, and others. The third is developing and sustaining a sense of purpose and belonging. The fourth is being mentally and physically healthy. And the fifth is being civically engaged and culturally responsive. These are all the skills that employers are saying that they need now. So we know that the world of work is changing quickly. And our current times are more uncertain now than pretty much ever. So without knowing the types of jobs that will exist in 10 to 20 years, my curiosity is how can education best prepare students to exceed in this new economy and also prepare them to exceed in life? Now, as I mentioned before, there are some important things we need to know. Top companies are increasingly emphasizing the importance of social and emotional learning skills in the next generation for their employees and frankly for the conditions that are fertile for entrepreneurs. In a recent Land the Job article, 93% of employers say they want to see soft skills or social emotional learning skills on an applicant's resume itself. I'm very excited to get to the panel discussion as quickly as possible, but I want to share a few words on CASEL's journey in support of children and their future-ready capabilities. So looking at the next slide, I'm going to discuss really briefly our Collaborating States initiative here at CASEL. So launched in 2016, the mission of the Collaborating States initiative at CASEL is to help states create the conditions where every educator is encouraged and equipped to implement equity-focused, evidence-based systemic social and emotional learning. In a few moments, you're going to hear from one of our panelists who was an important advisor to the Collaborating States initiative and is now CASEL's CEO. The CSI is now actively working with more than 40 states across the country in a community of practice where states are learning from one another and being inspired by high quality evidence-based examples. In 2019, the Collaborating States initiative adopted a strategic focus to systematically integrate social and emotional learning and career and workforce development. Since that time, we've seen additional states grow in their intentionality in the integration of SEL with career and workforce development, or for our utility today, CWD. And now we're actively working with 11 focus states. And through this process, we've all learned together collaboratively and produced a number of key resources and reports for the field, including a policy roadmap, which I mentioned before, multiple case studies on individual states, to include the great state of Delaware and their policy leader, who is a panelist today, a series of briefs and updates to our theory of action and recommended process tools. The key underpinning of all of these offerings is an integrated developmental framework, which aligns SEL very explicitly connected to career and workforce development. I'm going to share briefly a bit about that developmental framework in just a moment, but let's look ahead, thank you, to some career and workforce development explicit federal and state policies that already connect these two concepts. I'm just going to highlight and underscore a couple. The first is career and technical education. By virtue of Perkins 5 and the intentional nature of career navigation and counseling, we offer that social emotional learning is inherent to that process. Of course, it's inherent to career pathways, really knowing and understanding which career is the right choice, the best fit, and empowering students and sharing a sense of agency among our students and their families and their communities on which career pathway is really right for them. Thinking about dual degrees and certifications and apprenticeship and work-based learning experiences, we're going to hear an explicit example about how these can really live in a live practice capacity from one of our panelists concerning the international PTEC schools. So I'm really excited for you to hear more about that. There are several other examples on this slide, but I just also want to underscore beyond just programmatic investments, we see significant financial investments, right? So by way of the Every Student Succeeds Act, Carl D. Perkins, the reauthorization of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act. We also acknowledge that the American Rescue Plan, or ARP, is a sense of resource infusion, right? And it's really an unprecedented opportunity for us to invest in social and emotional learning and be thoughtful and deliberate about sustaining social and emotional learning practices within a career and workforce development context. This helps all of us be more inclusive, encourage equitable learning environments, and invite the community into our work. So in this next slide, I'm going to give you some examples of that through the developmental progression that I mentioned earlier. The Collaborating States Initiative, in collaboration with national partners, experts, and states, have developed and offer this framework. which recommends some really key points toward integrating social and emotional learning within a career and workforce development context. And this effort really addresses obstacles that can create some unintentional disparities or equity barriers. It helps us employ strategies that foster access or equity facilitators, and it underscores the need to be culturally responsive and customize student experiences by way of things like personalized career and academic planning. And if you have a workforce development background like I do, you'll recognize PCAPs, MyCaps, student success plans, really as great policy levers where social emotional learning naturally shows up, and we want it to explicitly show up. So one more point on that before we move toward our panel. This framework is really informed by the 3 developmental stages of occupational identity formation. So in light green, you'll see that here. We have exposure and awareness, exploration and engagement, and immersion, participation, and preparation. And through this progression, we encourage policy leaders and others to consider this as a foundational resource to advance career and workforce development explicitly through SEL opportunities and connections, in support of our children, in support of our parents, and definitely in support of our communities, to include the employer community and future entrepreneurs. So moving to the next slide, as our panelists know, the future is really demanding a lot from our students. We must provide an education that helps them develop their academic and cognitive abilities, nourishes their social and emotional skills, and gives opportunities to apply these skills in real-world situations and find future pathways that ignite their passions. So moving to the next slide, speaking of passions, I'm very honored and humbled to introduce a panel of extremely passionate, highly accomplished policy leaders and innovators who are joining our discussion today. Dr. Elia Samuel is the CEO of CASEL and is expanding social and emotional learning nationwide in support of children. She previously served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Labor, State, and National Engagement at the United States Department of Education, was a senior fellow at the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University, among other high-profile roles. She is joined by Dr. Teri Lawler, an education associate for trauma-informed practices and social emotional learning at the Delaware Department of Education. She was Delaware's 2010 School Psychologist of the Year and has spent her career translating research to practice. And in some of our states, or some of Delaware states, most vulnerable communities, Teri is really a national leader in this demonstration, and other states look to the work that she provides, conducts, and really problem solves through on a daily basis. Speaking of breaking through barriers, Stanley Litow is a professor at both Columbia and Duke University and is the author of The Challenge for Business and Society, From Risk to Reward. He previously served as the president of the IBM International Foundation and as the deputy chancellor of schools for the city of New York. So we're really, really honored to introduce this esteemed panel to you, who you'll see on screen now. Welcome, Dr. Samuel and Lawler. Welcome, Dr. Litow. Such a pleasure seeing everyone's faces. Thank you so much for investing your time and joining our registrants and participants today, who are really eager to get to hear your perspective and voice, particularly as we think about the relationship between SEL and career and workforce development. So without further ado, Dr. Samuel, I'm gonna open the first question up to you. And as we move along, I'm going to encourage questions to come through to the chat. Folks have already pre-submitted multiple questions, which tells me that everybody's very energized and interested in this topic. Dr. Samuel, what is the relationship between SEL competencies, career and workforce development skills? And is SEL really the engine that empowers these skills?
Thank you so much, Dana, and good afternoon. For some, good morning for others. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. And, as I've traveled around and as I talk about SEL with various constituents, whether it's parents, educators, business leaders, the thing I'm realizing is it's the vocabulary, the terminology, and some places are calling it 21st century skills. Some are calling it soft skills, employability skills, in-demand skills, career and workforce skills. And really what it boils down to fundamentally is language. And yes, it's also the same when you take all of these different titles and what people are calling it, it does boil down to social emotional learning skills. And the reality is it really is hard to know what the future is going to hold. There was a recent, it was a couple of years ago, a report that talked about how in 2030, most of the jobs that will exist then, we don't even know what those look like now. And so we really are preparing this generation for a world that we really don't know how it's going to exist. And I think about my own two sons. I have a now rising third grader and sixth grader, and just how much the technology has changed in their short education time period. I can't imagine what it's going to be like for them when they are ready for the workforce, or if they start their own businesses. And regardless of it, if it is a true from high school into the workforce, or high school into post-secondary, or high school into entrepreneurship, really the skills are fundamentally the same. And most recently, there was an article of Jamie Dimon from JP Chase Morgan was talking about these traits of successful leaders: humility, openness, fairness, being authentic. And these are all grounded in social emotional learning skills. So we're seeing leaders, business leaders, not only talk about the need for social emotional learning skills now, but we know that they're also going to be needed in the future. And I saw a note in the chat. I believe it was Cheryl who was talking about what happens after high school. And I couldn't agree with you more that we need to be thinking about social emotional learning post high school. It's actually one of the things that we are tackling here at CASEL, is thinking about the entire education continuum and how do we ensure supporting those social emotional learning skills, whether it's early childhood, K-12, young adults, and even the importance of adult capacities and capabilities, because we know it's so important for the adults to also model these skills and have these skills as well. So holistically, as we focus on career and development and entrepreneurship, this piece about social emotional learning is ever present. And I think about a LinkedIn survey of over 5,000 global professionals, and they found that 91% of employers believe that social emotional learning skills are important not only to the future of work, but the current trends and the changing nature of the workforce. And, as I think about myself as a new-ish CEO and president, the importance of SEL skills, and not just because we're CASEL and we focus on it, but as we focus on the skills internally, the communication, the team building, the being, creative leaders, being able to work across different constituent groups and understanding different perspectives are all really critical components of not just the leadership team, but holistically all staff. So this is really it's an ever-present conversation in so many different ways. Dana, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. I love how you linked the terminology and sort of underscored that there's lots of different titles to this, but at the end of the day, fundamentally, we're talking about social and emotional learning competence and skills. I'm curious, Stan and Teri, what do you see as the relationship between SEL and CWD?
Well, I will start off. I'd be happy to, and thank you very much for inviting me. I don't think that there is a separation between what people refer to as soft skills and hard skills. I think that they're what I would characterize as essential skills. They're not separate, they're integrated. And in the workplace, I spent 25 years at IBM with hundreds of thousands of employees, and I know that workforce needs change all the time. And you need people who can learn and grow and develop, learn new things, function in different ways. They need people who can work in a team people who can collaborate effectively, people who can problem solve, people who can communicate, people who can present. And those are not separate from what you're presenting about, what you're working about. So we need to break down the silos between these terms and say, this is an integrated way of making people career ready. And one part of it is the content. You know, you need to have content skills in core areas, and that's why education is so important. And it has to do with math and science, English and history, languages. All of those skills are critically important as people go through their education experience. But as they're learning those, what some people refer to as hard skills, the essential skills, the problem solving, the collaboration skills, and all of them are part and parcel of how you learn. So that when you get into the workplace, whether it's in a not-for-profit organization, the public sector, or the private sector, you need a combination of those skills, because the problems that you're dealing with today are not going to be the problems you're dealing with tomorrow. And the skills that you need are always going to have to grow. So I don't see these things as separate. Social and emotional learning, or what some people refer to as soft skills, are as essential as the hard skills and the education content. And the lesson that we need to learn is that that has to be part of learning at every level. And once you get into the workplace, you have to continue to learn and you have to continue to grow. And that's what businesses have learned over time. If you want to win the best talent, you've got to invest in that talent before they start, while they're there, and while they're continuing in the workforce. So that's my view from my experience in the public sector, in the private sector, and in the not-for-profit sector. I think it is not separate. They're all integrated.
Yeah, that seems to be a theme, Dr. Litow, between your response and Dr. Samuel's response. I want to bring Dr. Lawler into this conversation. As I mentioned earlier, many other states are looking to the leadership she's provided in the state of Delaware. Teri, what do you see as the definition or relationship between SEL and career and workforce development?
Thank you so much, Dana, for inviting me to the conversation. I was chomping at the bit with what I'm hearing, because the nimbleness and agility that Dr. Samuel and Dr. Litow described really reflect what we've tried to model at Delaware Department of Education. To break down those silos from the very beginning, we started looking for strategic ways to communicate our SEL work, and began by creating an inventory across the department of all of the places where social and emotional competence showed up, looking at the work through a whole child perspective. We took that inventory and then later crosswalked the SEL competencies that were created for our state, that competency guidance, with the work-based learning standards. Recognizing that these are essential skills that our young people need, but we can't jump over the adults, our educator workforce, to get to the students. So we have to begin by cultivating those very same skills within ourselves, recognizing that kids are learning vicariously from us, and then also that we have to build those very same self-awarenesses, recognizing our own emotions, and maintaining our regulation and self-awareness, self-management, especially over the last 2 to 3 years, and then using those skills, using those opportunities to build relationships with our colleagues, also with our community members and caregivers of the children that we serve, and then ultimately the youth.
Yeah, love that, Teri. Thank you. And I particularly want to underscore the agility that you mentioned you were able to create and effect through a communications strategy. And it makes me curious, Stan, and I'm going to ask you this as a follow-up question. So Dr. Lawler described creating an inventory of social and emotional learning and using that as sort of a cross-cutting communication strategy to break down silos. Dr. Litow, you also mentioned silos, and I'm curious about how can we leverage all stakeholders that play a role in the lives of children to break down those silos, particularly when financial resources tend to reinforce them?
Well, I think number one is the breaking down the silos means that we incorporate into our education and learning at virtually every grade level all of the collaborators and partners who can assist in the learning process. We have a whole range in the United States of not-for-profit organizations. They're not separate from the learning process, and they don't need to only exist after the school day is over or on the weekend or during vacations. They need to be part of the education system. We need to have a full and complete open door policy so that those in the not-for-profit sector, whether they're an arts organization or an athletic organization, or they can help in the content, or they provide social services or mental health services or career guidance, they can easily be incorporated into the school as part of the education process. And employers should not be only reserved for students when they complete high school or complete college. Employers have a role to play in the education process because they can build the skill set of the next generation of their workers. So when I talk about breaking down silos, it's not just breaking down the silo between K to 12 and post-secondary, or the silos between post-secondary and the private sector. It's incorporating that into our entire education experience, and not to think about everything as separate. You know, we have curriculum standards in our schools, but that doesn't mean that those curriculum standards can't be taught without incorporating these workplace skills and important skills into how the curriculum is taught. So if you're learning about science or math, you're going to be motivated to learn it if you're using those skills to solve a problem, collaborate with your classmates, work effectively with other institutions in your community in an effective kind of way. So that's what I mean about breaking down silos. It's not everything is separate. It's everything is interconnected. And it's important that we open the door and we learn how to work collaboratively and effectively. And when we have information about a student, that information should be shared with all of the organizations and agencies that interact with that student in an integrated, collaborative, holistic kind of process from the beginning of an education experience to the end. And I think that's why internships should not be reserved for the end of the education process. Community service shouldn't be something that is only available to some. All of these things should be integrated into the learning experience from the beginning, so that when students progress through their education experience, all of those skills are reinforced, because those skills are important in solving a problem, in communicating, in collaborating, in all of those kinds of things. So I think that this is an important subject matter, because it is important that we learn together how to improve. And we can't improve by continuing the siloed approach. It simply doesn't work.
Couldn't agree with that comment more. I want to open up that same question to the panel. And Dr. Lawler, just acknowledge you're getting a lot of enthusiasm in the chat for the resources that you described. And it looks like David Page is kind enough to share a couple of links, and can certainly follow up with some of those explicit examples, particularly the inventory, right, and the crosswalks. I just want to bring in the rest of the panel on the notion of breaking down silos. So Dr. Samuel, I'll look to you first, and then Dr. Lawler, I'll ask if you have some final comments before our next question.
So just to build, thank you, Dana, just to build on something that Stan said, CASEL's model has always included family community partnerships. And I think that's really important to note. Parents, community has always been core, because we know kids don't exist in a vacuum or in isolation. We also know that the importance of each of these being communities, parents as kids first teachers, and really where they're rooted, and schools to really work together. And we know that that's important, not only as they're matriculating through school, but also into young adulthood. And one of the things that we are actually elevating this year, our theme for our conference, and really the theme for our approach this year, is elevating the importance of family, school, and community partnerships. Because if we are going to really address the needs of our students and kids well, and really holistically our communities, we have to be working together. And that's one thing we saw through the pandemic, is that schools are very much the hub in so many different ways, but the importance that families and communities play in supporting every aspect of school. And so it's just really important that we do continue to elevate those partnerships. And just to double click to a point Stan made on, everything is interconnected. So we not only need to think about what the skills are, but where they occur as well, which we know SEL skills occur and are practiced and developed at home, at school, within the communities, within schools and within communities. And so we need to be thinking about the skills and the locations holistically, and the integration and interconnectedness of it all.
Thank you for that. It looks like the chat is lighting up in agreement around the interconnectedness, particularly stakeholders. Stan, you mentioned OST, or out of school time, and not-for-profit partners. Teri, you've done a lot of work in breaking down silos with not-for-profit partners. Would you like to come into this response and maybe provide a little conversation around that?
Sure. We often say that we can't have whole children if we have fragmented, disjointed systems, okay? If you want whole children, you need thriving families and resilient communities. The way that happens is by, breaking down those walls. Schools can't do it alone. We never have been able to. And we really have had to use our SEL skills when thinking about funding and the way our resource sharing and the ways that we make this happen. So a few years ago, we opened up professional learning and our book studies to the community. It does not make sense for us to operate with one mindset in the school building and another in other environments. We want everybody operating from the same playbook. So we developed a whole child community of practice, where our out of school time folks, community-based organizations, sit and link arms with our educators. We're there learning together, looking at challenges and problem solving together, so that those solutions are not cookie cutter for one environment, but really cross-sector opportunities that build a collective impact for the students that we serve, as well as the families and communities that they live in.
Appreciate that.
I want to say one other thing. I'm sorry, Dana.
Go right ahead.
And following with our ARP funding, we built a master plan for infrastructure that focuses on social, emotional, and behavioral well-being, recognizing that the only way to build and use these universal social competencies, we have to have well-being really from the start, health promotion, wellness promotion from the start, and then create a fluid continuum where young people are able to have access to assessment and high quality intervention strategies to promote their well-being and behavioral health throughout our youth serving systems.
I'm glad you expanded on that. And The other thing that I've learned from watching your work is really this deliberateness around ensuring equity in our practices. So advise us a bit more, Dr. Lawler. How can states and others ensure equity in workforce development practices within school districts?
I think some of the strategies that have served us well begin with recognizing that we don't have all the answers. So we don't try to, we don't start looking for solutions in-house. We look for collaborations. We reach out for partners. We engage in deep learning and research so that we can use the very best and most up-to-date evidence-based practices. And then from there, engaging in short cycle, plan, do, study, act processes, little experiments to look for what works and what works best in individual settings. We know that we don't have the same, challenges in every community in our state. And we want to honor what is best in all of our environments. We also have taken the time to think about some of the bright spots and recognizing that there are a number of communities that are doing things well. And we want to honor those assets and build on those assets so that we create a bit of a predictive tool when it comes to the work by sharing best practices across the state.
Thank you for that, Teri. And Cheryl in the chat said, we're always learning, right? So PDSA or whatever cycle to study the most high impact strategies and most effective policies helps inform that process, and we're never done. So very much appreciate that. I want to open up the same question to the rest of the panel. And Stan, I'll look to you first. I'm thinking about the work that you've done in Colorado and other states. So how can states ensure equity in workforce development practices within school districts?
Well, the first thing that states can do is stop screening for admissions into programs that provide unique and special opportunities for students. And those opportunities should be provided for all students. Sometimes people think that because a student has not performed well in grade 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, that means that they're never going to be able to perform well. And all of the data indicates that that's not the case. There are students who may not do well for a variety of different reasons. Maybe they weren't given the right opportunity. Maybe they had problems at home. Maybe they had a variety of other issues going on. But if given the opportunity and given the right support, we've learned that all students can succeed. So diversity, again, is not a silo. Diversity is it's integral to how we provide effective education. And we would learn, if we open the door and provide that opportunity for all students, we would learn that all students will benefit from an equitable environment. All students will benefit from having opportunities to be taught by teachers and principals who look like them. All students will benefit, and all of our school systems will benefit if we integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion into how we educate not some, but all. And that's critically important. When we have an opportunity, as we do, to be able to integrate an effective pathways approach, giving students an opportunity to have school, college, and career integrated, that's not just available for some students. It should be available for all students. And that's something that our states, our federal government, our local school districts, and everyone needs to understand. And it's important for them to look at the data, because the data indicate that there are lots of examples of young people who may not be succeeding early on. You brought up the example of a state like Colorado. We started the PTEC program in a variety of states and countries around the United States and around the world, and Colorado was one of them. A young man who began the PTEC program in Colorado in Longmont started coming to that district when he was 9 years old, not speaking a word of English, and he wasn't doing that well in grade 8. He was given the opportunity to succeed. He finished his high school diploma and his community college degree in 4 years through an integrated P-TECH program. And Jose is now at Harvard on full scholarship. So anybody who made the decision based upon Jose at age 9 or Jose in grade 8 would have been denying Jose and denying the nation the opportunity of having young people like Jose and like so many others who could achieve so much if given the right opportunity and the right support.
I love that, and very impacted by Jose's story. Thank you.
Dana,
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Litow really reminded me of a couple of things, a couple strategies that we're using to diversify our teacher workforce, but also to expand the opportunity of young people to go to college. Our seed funding has focused on young people who have traditionally been shut out of access to higher education. And most recently, it's been expanded to remove age restrictions for applicants so that people 25 years and older have access to an associate's degree. We are including all credit and non-credit programs that lead to the award of a recognized academic credential, expanded eligibility for support to 10 semesters, and then also recognizing that you can access that funding even with the GED or an equivalent credential, just to reduce the barriers and make sure that there's equitable access to 14 years of education through our state system.
Thank you for that, Dr. Lawler. Dr. Samuel, we've kind of heard a pastiche or some maybe leanings toward this notion of what groups of students may be over or under represented in our career pathways. What do you think are some things that we might do about that?
So first, I want to just stop and thank Stan and Teri for their comments. And, Stan, you shared Jose's story, and it made me reflect on my own. My family came to this country when I was 8, and I did not speak. English was not my first language. And I went through the mute stage. I was a struggling learner until my 8th grade year. And I had an English language arts teacher, Mrs. Wells, who I will never forget, who was the first teacher who saw me. She saw all of me. And as a result of Mrs. Wells, I went from being a very mediocre student to being an A student all through high school. But then it was the SAT, the ACT, and I was a terrible, and still am a terrible test taker, and still am. However, I was able to make it to undergraduate where I had a mentor and a coach and a sponsor. And I think about what that means: mentorship, coaching, sponsorship, because here I am, first generation, trying to figure out the post-secondary system, also trying to work full-time because my mother was not in a position to pay for me to go to college. And to your question, Dana, to answer it more specifically, it is the importance of mentorship and coaching and sponsorship. And I really feel, even for myself, such a strong obligation to mentor young, not just people of color, but women as well, who are trying to navigate the workplace, navigate their careers, because if you don't have somebody who can mentor you and truly help you think through opportunities, help you think through how to approach different scenarios, you're really at a default in a lot of ways. And then also, I talked about mentorship. That's one piece. When I think about sponsorship, it's those people in key roles that can say, no, I know Jose, I know Aaliyah, this is a young person who has all the opportunity. They just need a chance, and can sponsor you in those tables and those, in those offices and those rooms where you don't have a seat at the table, to be able to open up the doors of opportunity. And then coaching. So once you get that role, once you get that opportunity, having a coach that is within those walls that can help talk you through the day-to-day, because we know that retaining people of color is often equally as challenging as the recruitment. So that coaching piece is so important. And myself, I can tell you, I have about a half a dozen other president and CEOs who've been doing this longer that are on my Rolodex, that if I have questions, I need support, I need to talk through something, because they've been there and they've done it and they can offer that advice. And so I think the importance of mentorship, coaching, and sponsorship is so critical as we try to address the equity gaps.
Thank you for that, Aaliyah, and thank you for leading into that personal story. I very much appreciate that. And it's inspiring, right, as we think about opportunities to support students, particularly students from underrepresented backgrounds. Some of those that are in the audience today sent in questions, and I just want to underscore some of the points that you made that connect to them. There was curiosity about focusing on high poverty districts, perhaps urban districts, but also several points and questions and curiosities around practices that are geared towards supporting adolescents of color. And I think in some of the resources that we alluded to at the beginning of this webinar, we do have some very explicit strategies to include mentorship identified and elevated within those resources. So I would encourage everyone to check them out. I know they're listed on the registration page, and we'll have some resource links at the end. These programmatic resources are possible because of financial resources. So I want to follow up in our next question with you, Dr. Samuel, thinking about financial resources. Our nation put a lot of money toward COVID recovery, and I'm curious about what you see as being done with it, and what can we do to address our future ready needs in the short term, but then also in the long term?
So, I will say I've been asked a lot what should be prioritized as we think about, the future. Is academic recovery? Is it SEL? What should we be focusing on? And I really believe we have to do them both. We can't SEL our way out of this, and we can't just focus in on academics and see our way out of this, but it's truly the integration of the two of them in order to achieve the academic recovery that we know is so important, but also to ensure the stability and long-term future of our young people, because our kids of today are the adults of tomorrow, and we want them to be well-functioning in all different capacities. We also know that SEL is not a quick fix, and this is a long-term process. So we have to think about solutions from a long-term perspective, continue to invest in programs, for example, the mentorship programs, internship programs that we talked about, and service learning programs that we know can support students practicing these critical SEL skills to be college, career, future, life ready. And we also need to think about investing into professional learning and ongoing professional learning. I think, Stan, it was you that said early on that we continue to learn and grow. So we need to continue to make that investment into professional learning and professional development for that continued learning. And I think those are just a couple of examples, but really making sure that the things that we are investing in, whether it's short-term or long-term, are evidence-based practices, and that we are engaging the stakeholders across communities, because those closest to the problem have the best solution. And so we should be working in partnership with community members and leaders to make sure that we really are addressing the issues holistically and meeting the need.
Thank you for that. Dr. Lawler, you also connected on using these resources to meet and support holistic needs. You mentioned a comprehensive plan for ESSER and ARP resources. Will you expand upon that? And then I'll go to you, Stan, for our final question.
Sure. We're really excited about our social, emotional, and behavioral well-being plan. It was created cross-sector, so we had representatives across the department. As a team, our intent was to embed all of our resources to support well-being, the well-being continuum within our MTSS infrastructure. So we had a policy lever, Regulation 508, to support implementation for surveillance and screening and assessment, as well as intervention, planning, monitoring, progress monitoring, so that young people had access to the foundational supports. We see our SEL work as foundational to everything else that takes place. It's hard to learn when you are not feeling emotionally well. Being able to articulate that and access support is integral to their school success. We want them to feel connected, protected, and respected. And to do that, the SEL plan, that SEBW plan, was a conduit for making that happen, but also it provided the backbone infrastructure for our LEAs to know that at the state, this was top of mind and prioritized, and that we had resources embedded, capacity building at every level, contractors and job embedded coaching to support not only their exploration of the tools, but also installation in their school communities, as well as implementation, in the day-to-day.
I love that. Connected, protected, and respected. Really great phrases to put in our tool belt. And I also love the phrase at the beginning of our discussion, Stan, that you used around essential skills. We've got about 2 more minutes for this final question, so I'm going to pose it to you first. How can we really reinforce essential skills by expanding experiential learning and ensure that these experiences support the development of young people as they prepare for this uncertain economy?
Well, I'll give you an example, a practical example. We started the P-TECH program in the United States in one school in Brooklyn, New York in 2011. And there are now over 300 of these schools across 28 countries, 13 states, serving tens of thousands of young people. And in that program, the barrier between high school and college is totally eliminated. First of all, there's no screen for admission. All students are admitted. When President Obama featured that first P-TECH school in his State of the Union address, he talked about how innovative and creative it was. And then he visited the school and had an opportunity to walk into the classrooms and see how students were learning algebra in the context of problem solving. He was visiting a school that had 100% students of color, virtually all low-income students, and they were succeeding at rates significantly higher than all other schools. They were completing their 2-year degree, going on to get their 4-year degrees, and many of them working in high-paid jobs in the private sector in a whole host of areas. So one of the things that we can learn is that when we have those kinds of innovative models, we need to bring them to scale and make them sustainable. And there's lots of ways that we can do that. First of all, we can make our Pell Grant tuition assistance program available for students when they take their college courses on the high school register. Number 2, we can take a model called Federal College Work Study that began in the Johnson administration back in the 1960s. And we can open up that work opportunity for students in high school and in college, and not just to work on college campuses, but to work for not-for-profit organizations, to work in the private sector, to work in the public sector. So experiential learning would be something that would be supported by a subsidized internship program available not just for some students, but for all. So we can break down the silos, we can work effectively and make these opportunities available for all students. And the only barrier is thinking about embracing innovation as opposed to isolating it. And I think that we have the opportunity now. The new leadership in the U.S. Department of Education has talked about making pathways a more extensive opportunity available for all. We're planning a National Education Summit meeting in early 2023, where we can highlight the example of these successful initiatives and say they're not just opportunities for some, they're opportunities for all.
I really appreciate that. And it connects back to your prior comments on opportunities for all. I just want to call out in the chat, thanking Megan Blanco from NASB. Yep, we see that service learning resource and we value it. So I encourage folks to check that out. Is there a final word on experiential learning or Dr. Samuel mentoring that you'd like to make before we move to close?
You know, I just think it's important to note that just as we're preparing kids for future learning and the future work, experiential learning allows students to apply their learning in a different way, to build relationship in a different way, and to enhance those skills. And so if we really want to get them prepared for the future of work, we need to allow them these experiential experiences to be able to be prepared. SEL skills not only need to be taught, but practiced. And so in the same with, preparing for life, we have to give young people an opportunity to not only learn the skills, but practice them.
Thank you for that, Dr. Samuel. And thank you,
Dana, I think Teri was trying to get in. Were you trying to get in, Teri? I saw you lean in.
I'll be quick. So in our hope to cultivate purpose, place, and plans for the future, I think it's important for young people to begin their personalized career and academic planning sooner. So we have a middle years project going right now. I'd love to see that same level of planning taking place in the early grades so that we really harness kids' dreams and their passions and then support them as they grow in identifying the experiences that will really bring those passions to life.
Thank you for that, Dr. Lawler, and apologies for not reading the room as I was looking at my final notes. And as we're transitioning to our closing slide here and the closing of our conversation, we have a few additional resources that are related in addition to the resources that were already shared from CASEL and the Collaborating States Initiative specific to social emotional learning and career and workforce development. I just want to underscore, in light of our changing international economic conditions, public health conditions, and needed social shifts, there's really a growing interest, and we see it today in the chat, and a growing sense of urgency from states and leaders to create safe and supportive learning environments grounded in positive relationships that ultimately produce students that are future ready. I heard today that you need thriving children and resilient communities. I also learned that opportunities must and should be provided for all students, and the integration of social and emotional learning and academic recovery is inextricably linked together in relation to career and workforce development and our long-term recovery strategy. So I want to thank our esteemed panelists today for their contributions to this discussion and inspiration, right, for our conversation today and as it ripples out and carries onward, inspiring others to act upon. For more information on the Collaborating States Initiative, social emotional learning and career and workforce development, or any of our policy resources, please go to casel.org. And we look forward to connecting with you again very, very soon.